Hello, all you wonderful people out there in YouTube land. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are the Nonprofits, a show where we discuss current events and social issues from a skeptical humanist perspective. The Nonprofits is a product of the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of religion and government and promoting positive atheism. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thenonprofits. Tell us what you like, what you don't like in the comments, or email at us at non-profits@atheist-community.org. Find us on Discord at tiny.cc/ACA Discord, and like, subscribe, and ring that bell to get notifications for our latest videos. Howdy, hosts. How we all doing?
Howdy.
Doing good.
Howdy, Martin.
So we have a new face on the Nonprofits, I believe, but not a new face to the ACA. Vila Bianca.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, actually, I'm going to make a bold claim here and say that I'm actually the oldest face of the group on the Nonprofits. I was on the Nonprofits back when it was Jamie Boone and Kevin Stein, and before I was on anything else.
That's true.
So this is my grand re-entrance. But I'm excited to be here. You guys have taken the show in an awesome direction and revamped it and made it all shiny and spiffy. So I'm soundly impressed. You guys might know me from other ACA shows. I am the host of Talk Heathen and Secular Sexuality, along with my co-hosts on Thursdays and on Sundays. I also do some of my own stuff on the side. So I have a channel called How to Skeptic, where I talk very much about good internet hygiene, is what I call it, research tactics and best practices from my experience as a journalist. So giving some insight into how to skeptically peruse information, which I believe is what we're going to be doing today.
Indeed. And I'm so sorry that I didn't realize you'd been on the Nonprofits before. My mistake. Okay. I should have known better.
I had blonde hair at the time, different person altogether.
It popped up in the algorithm for me not too long ago. I was like, oh shit.
Yep.
He was on the Nonprofits. What do you know?
The return.
Return
and
of
Cynthia,
the V.
how you doing?
I'm well, thank you very much. How you doing, Martin?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here. It's a beautiful day, and yeah.
Cool.
I think we're all pretty
Johnny?
excited. I'm fine. I'm excited to be here with all of you. Some of you I have not been on the show with before, but I'm happy this is your first time sort of walking us through the articles and stuff, and I think we're all really excited about that. And Cynthia, it's wonderful to have you back.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back. Thank you.
Very wonderful.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed. All right. So let me get the ball rolling here. For our first article today, we're going to be looking over the abortion law protests in Poland that are putting civil liberties in the spotlight. So what's going on pretty much is Poland just made the abortion law a little bit more restrictive than it already was, but they already had one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the world. So who wants to go ahead and get us started here? Johnny, you want to fill us in?
I'll fill you in. And that's exactly what I found is before all of this happened, Poland already had one of the most restrictive abortion laws in Europe. It only allowed abortions in the case of crime. That was like rape or incest. A threat to the woman's life or health, and fetal abnormalities. Now the court ruled that that fetal abnormalities don't cut it anymore. And in the language that I found as to what the justification for that was, well, first off, it's the Law and Justice Party is the ruling party in Poland right now, and they're closely aligned with the Catholic Church. And all of the rhetoric that I'm seeing on this is, well, we don't want people to be aborting Down syndrome fetuses because that's what's going to happen. And so they're framing it in terms of it's about allowing these individuals to continue life, not to be discriminated against. They're taking a very protective rhetoric as their position, ignoring completely the rights of the person who's going to have that child eventually, and which is pretty typical when the two sides of the of the argument are butting heads. They're both saying they're protecting rights, and this is just where Poland's at right now.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Let me throw it over to V.
Yeah. What bugged me about this, apart from the, broad religious overreach into individual autonomy, is the fact that they were using the quarantine and COVID specifically to crack down on protests against this law. We are seeing a big uprising in people turning out to protest this, and a lot of concern around what that could mean for other minority groups, especially LGBTQ individuals, and even environmentalists are getting on board and kind of giving their 2 cents. So we're seeing a pretty big uprising right now, but they're using the pandemic and, the 6-foot rule and all of that to kind of stymie any pushback. And this is something we've seen here in the US as well, very much so. We saw this over the summer with the Black Lives Matter protests, where the main critique from a lot of people who disagreed with it for moral or, political reasons were trying to use the pandemic as an excuse to criticize it. And then we're also seeing, especially kind of right here at home for me in Texas, an excuse to close down abortion clinics in the wake of COVID. There's a Reuters article where Jennifer Delvin, who's an ACLU attorney, she's criticizing them because essentially what they're doing is saying that Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics are providing quote unquote non-essential services to people. And so it's rightly being called out by the ACLU and others as being just a sham, an excuse. Jennifer said, banning abortion does not slow the transmission of the virus. It just forces people to stay pregnant and have children against their will. And I'll pass this over to Cynthia, because I know, Cynthia, you've got some really awesome, more of the biblical theology side of things as well. But the thing that bothers me about this is that hypocrisy, right? Is that, oh, well, we're looking out for the little guy, or we're worried about the pandemic, or all of these very shallow, almost insultingly simplistic arguments that are passed off as the real reason, when you know that that's not the case. In the case of Texas, they can say it's about the pandemic all they want, but in the Statesman in just last month said that the Texas state legislature is planning on passing a whole lot of pro-life legislation in 2021, including trying to outlaw abortion altogether in the state by way of heartbeat bills. So we're supposed to assume that these measures are taken out of the concern for public safety or a concern for, fetuses with certain kinds of developmental disorders. But really, there is no other reason for this except that some people don't like abortion and take it upon themselves to implement that.
Well, that's a great way to approach it too, is since they are yanking away the rights of an individual to determine what they can do with their own body. Let's look, how do we frame this in a way where no one can essentially, you have to take on a lousy position. You have to acknowledge that you are, tearing up this potential life, this poor life, this person you're supposed to, protect. It preys upon our natural instincts to protect those that need protection. Mm-hmm. It's dirty pool, but it's smart to do that, and because I think it's effective for a lot of people.
It is, as long as you're not educated as to the real motivation and to the holes within that argument. So I think one of the biggest things we can do is to call it out when it's a shitty excuse. Say, hey, that's a shitty excuse, and here's why.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
I was even going to say, even though this is not necessarily in my notes, people, but one of the things that kind of, where what did Peter used to say, grinds my gears when it comes to this whole debate concerning, abortion, especially when we talk about some of the individual reasons why a person may choose to get abortion. And I've recently had a whole back and forth on social media about this, because I do support a woman's right to choose, as far as and how that particular decision to have an abortion is between the pending mother and the healthcare provider. And also too, it's a very individual very personal choice in some cases, and it's not, and it can be very nuanced. It's not a black and white thing. Like, I just want to kill a baby and eat it, or, whatever they say. It's kind of craziness.
Oh my God.
I know, right?
Cynthia.
I know, right?
You're not supposed to let out our secret.
That's getting clipped and circulated.
That's an atheist inner circle.
It's not just that I want to eat babies. There's other reasons too.
Exactly. But
high in iron content.
Cynthia's vegan, so
as
are all of we for purposes of being on the panel with her today, right?
For this particular time period, everyone is vegan, right?
Absolutely, right. That's how that works.
Exactly. But one of the things that kind of like really, I don't want to say kills me, but it kills me that, when you are doing these overarching reasons for people not necessarily having abortions, and especially, like, say, for instance, a person decides to have one because they can't afford it. Poverty is a real thing in the United States. Well, poverty is a real thing all around the world, right? And, children cost money. They really do. And, and just giving up a child for an adoption is not always going to be a very easy thing, or maybe even something that, a person is capable of doing.
Absolutely.
And, so like, but the crazy thing about it is like, you tell me, okay, don't get an abortion if you can't afford it, right? Do something else. But so I have the child, but, if I'm impoverished, now you want to cut social service programs so that I can't take care of the child. I mean, so what do you want me to do? And one of the things, like, even like reading this particular article, and even like when we have seen all over the United States with these rolling back of different rights and allowances when it comes to abortions, and mostly in red states, is that you're going to end up having the same thing that happened back in the day. People are still going to get it, but they're going to get it in a very unsafe, unhealthy way, and and mortality is going to go up. And for what? I mean, like, and the crazy thing, even like what's in my notes, is like, I know this whole argument, especially with Poland being a very religious, very Catholic country, about, not ending a life, or, not taking a life because it's against God's law. But there's really nothing in the Bible that says that, abortion specifically is something that's against God's law. I mean, I was looking at the for you all know for
we know
freedom. Yes, you know for freedom from religion. And they had a whole blog post concerning this, about the biblical truths. Hopefully we can have this in the show notes afterwards. But a couple of them that I wanted to kind of point out that they had is that one is a pregnant woman who is injured and aborts the fetus warrants financial compensation only to her husband, suggesting that the fetus is property, not a person. And that's in Exodus 21:22-25. Another point that they brought up was the gruesome priestly purity test to which a wife accused of adultery must submit will cause her to abort the fetus if she's guilty, indicating that the fetus does not possess the right to life. And that's in Numbers 5:11-31. And one more I want to bring up is, this is a nice one. Elisha's prophecy for soon-to-be king Hazazel said that he would attack the Israelites, burn their cities, crush their heads of their babies, and rip open their pregnant women. 2 Kings 8-12. So that was like really a lovely picture. That
It's an earlier covenant, Cynthia. It was an earlier covenant.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. Jesus did away with all that. Oh, but he didn't, because he said that he did not come to destroy the law, but to come to fulfill it. So there you go.
My favorite part is how they still print that earlier covenant and put it in every single seat of every single church. And it's like, well, if it's irrelevant, why are you still putting it in the pews?
Indeed.
Yeah.
I started a conversation recently with a Catholic friend of mine who I've mentioned on the show. Patrick, you're out there. I hope you're not watching, because I really like you.
I also have a Catholic friend named Patrick.
A Catholic Patrick.
I'm sure there are very many Catholic Patricks.
I'm sure. Probably some in Ireland, maybe. And
indeed.
But what I was saying to him is like, well, if everything happened is God's will, then like, what good is it to legislate the ability to have an abortion, right? I mean, is it going to happen? It's going to happen. Am I thwarting God's will? And to me, like, aren't you also sending these soul imbued clusters of cells immediately off to some kind of heaven right away?
Yeah.
Aren't you helping them out? If this world is just a doormat, is just a place to wipe your feet, then you just boosted them to the next level without ever having to deal with whooping cough and cancer and
It's like a speed run.
It's a speed run. It's a speed run of life.
There you go.
Exactly. And but the truth is that's a pretty flippant way of looking at abortion, but because it is a difficult decision that people have to make all the time, whether they decide to do it legally in this country or illegally in this alternate universe that Christian nationalists want to create. But it is a difficult decision that affects people emotionally, sometimes for a lifetime. They think about that.
And honestly, I think a lot of this conversation could be given more nuance by saying that being pro-choice also supports the choice not to have an abortion, right? Like, we're not saying we are going to legislate the requirement that people receive abortions, right? The goal here is to make sure that you have the ability to choose not to, and that you're supported in a social network that allows you to, take care of that child in a effective and efficient way. So yeah, I think we're focusing on a. I feel like we're conceding so much of the argument, even by using terminology that they have put in place. But yeah, it's a big question for sure.
Indeed. I think that, like, any law that is overarching oftentimes is harmful, and any time that you, like, create barriers for someone to get something done, in a healthy manner, for whatever reason, is a problem. And I just and sometimes, like, not sometimes, all the time, I wish that lawmakers, were in a more reasonable mind frame when it came to issues like this.
Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate.
Even a more scientifically minded, like, have a doctor or two, even a pro-life doctor, any doctor, like, look at some of these bills. There was one in Ohio where they basically were, like, legislating the idea that you could re-implant an ectopic pregnancy into the womb as opposed to aborting it. And all of the doctors who looked at that were like, that's not possible. We do not have that technology.
Yeah.
You are essentially asking for something we do not have the capacity to physically do.
I'm wondering if anyone knows, wasn't there, like, another state that was, like, requiring a woman having to do some type of, like, consultation? I forgot exactly what it was.
Wasn't that the Lone Star State requiring, like, some sort of, you had to consult and you had to see the ultrasound? Was that Texas?
Oh,
that's it.
Yeah.
That's more than one state too.
Sure.
More than a few do that. I want to say Iowa does. Off the top of my head, I know I've heard that before. Not sure.
And it's medically unnecessary.
Absolutely.
It's a guilt trip.
It's
That's all it
invasive
is. Or an attempt.
And in Ohio, they just passed another law that you need to either bury or cremate fetal remains if it is aborted, which adds another $2,000+ to an already astronomical medical bill, as well as a whole lot of unnecessary guilt tripping and grief, and it's unfortunate.
And good luck trying to get, like, an insurance to even cover that.
Exactly.
So what I would have liked to see is these same people that are advocating for these abortion restrictions are also advocating for bolstering or a beefing up of the social services for adopted children, or for unwanted pregnancies, or for, I don't know, super orphanages for kids that need it. And the orphanage system is abandoned in this country. But also, I remember reading something like African American children, disabled children, different kinds of children are not on the fast track to permanent homes. They're going from foster home to foster home sometimes. And they're oftentimes sort of left behind. So are these same people really going hardcore to try to get nice homes for these children whose biological parents did not want to have them? No.
Oh, I
Only
can
if you're
answer that.
heterosexual.
Right.
Sorry.
I can also answer that. That would be a no,
Yeah.
Johnny. Especially as a person who is a social worker who has worked with people living with chronic illnesses. A lot of them have come to me after being in the foster care system, or what do they call that now? The ward of the state. Yeah.
Word of the state.
And a majority of them all their lives. And either going from, like I said, place to place, not necessarily being wanted, basically like, raising themselves on their own. But there's no like wraparound services that's even half as well as it should be in order for these, for them to have a whole life. So
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Can I say something else?
Life should be the entire life. Oh, please, Johnny, go ahead.
May I please? Okay. So I did a little bit more research. First of all, I like to say that the fact that people are out in the streets, despite the quarantine, despite all of that, it shows the power of protest. When people show up and they let their voices be heard, right, as opposed to their bricks or American flags or whatever the hell else they decide to beat people to death with, things can change, and politicians will listen because they know that crowd is going to take some additional action. But I wanted to say this is that Argentina just went in completely the opposite direction as this, right? Abortion in Argentina has been legal up to the 14th week of pregnancy since January 24th, 2021. After the corresponding bill was passed by the National Congress in December 2020. Once the 14th week has passed, though, abortion is legal only in cases of rape or in case of the health of the mother is in danger. So Argentina was outlawed. And then I can only imagine where people were going to get their abortions in Argentina. Were they going to Chile? Were they going to Uruguay? Were they just going to unlicensed doctors? But so it's not just the whole world is trying to restrict. Some places it's opening up. And what really bothers me is that the United States, because it's so religious and because the religious groups have such a big voice in this country, are going in the opposite direction as a place like Argentina, which has historically been regarded as a fairly religious place. Although
Argentina also had massive amounts of protests, particularly among women and LGBTQ people. So Poland is following their example in that regard. That might be what's needed here.
Yeah.
And they lost last time, and a new president comes, and they won this time. So just because you don't get what you want the first time you do that round of protests, keep it up, and good things can happen. So
keep pushing. Absolutely.
Yes, consistency is key.
Absolutely. All right. That was an awesome conversation about that topic. Let's go ahead and move on here to an article from the Army Times. Just as a brief intro, the Army Times is written for those serving in the Army and their families. The article in question is the Army's and the Army Times' response to a an Army chaplain who posted on Facebook denigrating transgender troops. Now, this is related to the Army Times in a couple ways because the comments in question were posted on the Army Times Facebook page by the guy, and then this is an article by the same source about it. And it was rather refreshing to see how thoroughly they covered it. They detailed all of the new ways that the new administration is reversing the ban on trans people in the military. And how they're ensuring that they get the same quality of medical care as anyone else who serves. So V, let me kick it over to you. What was your take on this? What did you get out of it?
Yeah, I could go so many different directions with this, Martin, for sure. But I do want to read at least part of this quote, and I guess content warning. This is going to be aggressively anti-trans for 2 seconds. Calvert, the chaplain in question, says, "How is rejecting reality, in parentheses, biology, not evidence that a person is mentally unfit, in parentheses, ill, for some reason, and thus making that person unqualified to serve? There is little difference in this than over those who believe and argue for a flat earth, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. What a waste of medical resources and funding." So a couple things here. And this is going to be so full of caveats, it's going to be very difficult to get my point, but I'll try my hardest.
You can do it.
Do it.
First, it's exhausting to have to deal with this over and over again this blatantly reductionist and ignorant language surrounding the concept of transgender individuals. Just because your study of sex and biology was limited to a few wellness classes in a puritanical school system doesn't mean that phenomena outside of your realm of experience qualify as rejecting reality. Simply not the case. Just because you don't understand how something could be doesn't mean that that thing is not. I think as a ground rule, we should understand that that is a good way of approaching the world skeptically. Don't just say, no, it cannot be. Ask, what am I missing here? What more evidence do I need? I also want to kind of poke a little bit at that idea of talking about flat earthers and other examples of extremism that Calvert is kind of waving the flag at me like, oh no, what happens if we have flat earthers in the army? And they do.
They're everywhere.
We have had callers call in to Talk Heathen espousing things as out there as flat earth theory and touting their military experience as credibility for that theory. So I have the firsthand evidence having talked to these people that this is something that exists.
I heard that call.
Did you?
And
Yes.
I almost ran into a pole when I heard that call.
Yes.
I'm going to stop talking now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, it's out there.
Can I just say, I don't want nonprofits listeners to be listening to the nonprofits and operating heavy machinery or operating motor vehicles at the time. Please consult your doctor. Always keep your eyes on the road. Were you talking about walking into a pole or driving into a pole, Cynthia?
I was on my way to work one morning listening to Talk Heathen when a young person who had military experience called in who was speaking of the flat earth theory, including the firmament and the dome. And I will never forget, even though I think that call was like over a year ago because I was still going to work and now work from home. And I don't forget it. I sometimes go to bed at night.
Okay. Cynthia, objection non-responsive. Were you driving or were you walking?
I was driving. Okay. On my way to work. Because I live in Chicago.
So you heard it and you just jerked the wheel out of anger? Or what happened?
Well, I had a disbelief and actual, shock and awe and a bit of trauma. Happened all at the same time. And I had nothing to assist me because I was by myself. I had no medication. I had nothing. All I could do was just get my wits about me and say, what am I listening to?
Flat Earthers, look what you're doing to us.
Oh my gosh.
Aren't you ashamed of yourself?
You should be. You should be so ashamed.
No, but here's the thing.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, V. You were making a point.
Okay, I enjoyed that conversation very much, and I'm sorry we almost killed you, Cynthia. My concern here is again with the shitty cover arguments. Right now, the Pentagon very proactively and in a act that I think is going to have a lot of positive benefit, has ordered a pause across the military just in this last week. So I believe it was February 3rd or 4th, to address white nationalism and extremism, including QAnon conspiracies within its ranks. So this is not something that is unheard of, right? The idea that there might be groups that you need to keep an eye on. And this isn't the first time the military has ordered a stand down. They've had to address overwhelming problems with suicide and sexual assault and racism. And my point here, obviously, is not to equate any of these things with allowing transgender people into the military. My point is that to pretend that the military is this paragon of virtue that cannot be shaken, that is somehow exempt from human fuck up, from the bigotry that is inherent in this society, is to make it into a very dangerous edifice, right? It is to give them credibility in an area where they have clearly fucked up in the past multiple times and will in the future. Mm-hmm. And the idea that it's untouchable or untainted is frankly quite ridiculous to me. And one last thing, and then I'll hand this off to everybody else. my own feelings about the military-industrial complex aside, and they are complex, in her book, Victory by Linda Hirschman, she outlines the process of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and what the impacts were on the gay community specifically. And one of the biggest things that made gay rights move forward as quickly as they did was the fact that they were allowed to openly serve in the military, because it comes with that comes a lot of credibility as a citizen, a lot of veneration, a lot of respect. And for better or worse, that was something that gay people specifically were told they could not access. And that is also a place where a lot of people who are, not very well off go to get an education, go to get food, go to get housing, go to get medical care for the time they serve, and then beyond that. Mm-hmm. And those were also, things that were not they didn't have the ability to access. So this trans ban and the fact that it was repealed is a good thing, not because myself personally am okay with the military-industrial complex again, but because it allows a group of people who previously did not have access to those resources, access on an equal level.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, V, for getting us started there. I'm going to go ahead and, Cynthia, I think you had something in the notes here about biology and something about the DSM as well. Do you want to go ahead and fill us in?
Yeah, so, I think it's so... When I read that quote that V read earlier, especially about this whole equivocating biology of a person in mental illness, first off, as far as like when it comes to sexual orientation, that was taken out of the DSM. The DSM is is basically a guide for psychologists and psychiatrists to actually utilize to diagnose mental illness. And so, sexual orientation was taken out of the DSM, I want to say like in the 70s, I want to say. And then one of the things that I brought up here, because especially with this whole mentally unfit thing, which was again driving me crazy, one of the things I wrote down about DSM history is that with the publication of the DSM edition 5 in 2013, gender identity dysphoria was eliminated as a diagnosis of a person concerning mental illness, and it was replaced with gender dysphoria. And this change was supposed to focus more on the diagnosis of gender identity related distress, rather than the person, if they're saying that they are transgender, that they're mentally ill. And that is not the case whatsoever.
Right. And then in that case, transition is the recommended treatment for gender dysphoria.
Correct. Exactly. And so these overarching arguments to actually fit, what they call Calvert, that was his nicknames, worldview, especially with a bad equivocation concerning science. And then also throwing in the flat earth. I was like, houseway, that's a straw man,
Yeah. Oh yes.
And I was just and especially if I need people, if you're going to be making these particular arguments, to kind of pick up a science book once in a while.
Absolutely.
It would really help, and I don't tout myself as a scientist or even a person that is have a deep understanding of everything. I mean, I'm a Trekkie. That's as far as it goes. But
respect.
Yes. Oh, and a Whovian. I forgot my background. But but regardless of that, I mean, sometimes if you're not really sure about certain things, or maybe if your arguments sound a little quay, maybe again pick up a little a little science book, look at a YouTube video of actual scientists that are actually speaking about these particular subjects, and maybe you will learn something. And also too, I always talk about this when these particular subject matters come up concerning gender and race. Both of these things are social constructs.
Mm-hmm.
They are both of them are social constructs, even though they're different, but they're still man-made. You know, we assign, depending on, you know, especially when we're talking about gender, we assign certain, you know, man's role is this, woman's role is that, you know, based on biology, and it should not be the case, you know.
Absolutely.
And you know, and even in like even like when we're looking at like a job that a person can do, you know, if, like, say for instance, if a woman has ability to be a firefighter, she can, you know, pick up a 150-pound person and go ahead and run with them. I mean, give them the job, you know. And same thing on the other side. So like these things should not be like limited based on, you know, what gender a person is if they are cis or if they're trans, you know.
Right.
And also, even when we're talking about people serving in the military, you know, good on you. I'm not doing it, you know, even though I asked my dad back in the day, can I go? And he said, nope. But my father was a Navy person. Like he, you know, he served for 8 years during the 50s. So you already know, you know. So that's why he was like, no daughter of mine, especially like, you know, that's when the military, I mean, not to say that it's still not racist, but it was overtly racist.
I want to
And
talk about that in my
yeah.
segment because I want to talk about the
Yeah.
history of it a little bit.
Yes.
But
Okay.
yeah,
Then I will
but I can
shut
only
up.
imagine. No.
Right.
I
No,
can only imagine what your father went through in the 1950s, for
No,
God's sake.
seriously.
yeah,
like-
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, so, but regardless of this, and just wrapping up my thoughts, like, you know, people, if again, goes back to, if you have the ability to serve and you are physically and mentally fit to serve, no matter what identification or sexual orientation or race or what have you, let them serve without hearing from the peanut gallery, who obviously do not understand basic science. Thank you.
Look what
No,
you're doing. Look what you
absolutely.
people are doing to Cynthia today.
Getting her all riled up.
My God. I'm sorry.
Oh no.
Oh, and she
Riled her
dropped.
too much. We lost
She's
her.
taking a break. She can't even look at it. Okay, she's back.
Oh, she's back now. Okay.
Okay,
all
very
right.
good. Sorry about that.
No.
No, that's all right. Before I pass the ball to you, Johnny, I just wanted to make a brief point off the subject of people in the military not being venerated simply for the act of being in the military, but you know, if they have specific accomplishments or they do a good job in the military, that's, you know, that's awesome. But I also want to point out that 14% of the people who participated in the Capitol riots on January 6th were current or former service members.
Yeah.
And with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Johnny to fill us in on military history.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear they're doing an audit of the ranks to
Yeah.
find out who these conspiracy theorists.
Right. If you're concerned about something, maybe it should be that. Just, you know.
Maybe it should be that. Yeah. I looked at the history of exclusion in the military, and I remember I used to be an Army boyfriend years and years ago, and so I had a lot of exposure to the Army, and I had learned through the course of, you know, the reading about it that the Army specifically has been sort of at the vanguard of forcing integration into society in advance of the rest of society. Now, it's not because the generals and the Joint Chiefs of Staff are woke as fuck. It's not because of that. It's because they needed people to be there and have bodies on the ground, feet on the ground. Just a quick history of it. And it kind of bleeds into our next topic that I won't be leading us into, but it'll connect. I found a link, and it'll be in the description, talking about the history of different groups in the military. So originally, militias were restricted to freemen or citizens. So that meant landowning white men in the early days, in the early militia days. In the Revolutionary War of 1812, very few Black folks were allowed to serve in state and federal units. In the Civil War, a lot of sometimes slaves in the South were conscripted to serve in a servient role. Aton Shea Films does a fantastic series of videos about Black Confederates and debunks that whole Southern myth that people were doing it voluntarily. We'll maybe send that link in the description. He's fantastic if you haven't seen him. But there were people in the North that did enlist for the Union Army. Then Jim Crow just stopped all of that to exclude African Americans, and of course there were other groups as well. But what I found was mostly African American coverage. In the Great War, World War I, there were many African Americans that were enlisted. They were referred to, and immigrants as well, referred to as hyphenated Americans, which was a derogatory term for immigrants, which I think's interesting. It seems like a very 21st century way of slapping immigrants in the face, calling them hyphenated Americans. But they brought in lots of people there. 350,000 African Americans served in the American Expeditionary Force in France. The 369th Infantry, called the Harlem Hellfighters, served. Of course, Jim Crow was pushing back to exclude blacks, Jews, and other groups, but the war awakened people to this idea that, hey, we can be all part of this national consciousness together, that this is our country too. And I went and risked my neck going and fight the Germans, in Belgium. I ought to have some certain rights here. Of course, the Nazis were inspired by Jim Crow. And talk about World War II, there's a movie called Bataan, which I saw when I was a kid. I watched a lot of these movies when I was a kid. It, made in 1943, symbolizes America in a small unit whose members include a Jew, a Pole, an Irishman, two Filipinos, and an African American. The Army was still segregated, but it showed people in the movie theaters what it looked like to see an integrated America. So I think that might have been influential. After World War II, we saw more commitment to get African Americans in the Army. Again, was it for good reasons? Was it for humanitarian reasons? No, they needed people to go fight Korea. Truman in 1948 racially integrated all military units. And what I found similar to the arguments we're seeing today, or we saw years ago about gay people serving in the military, same thing with transgender people serving in the military. Army Secretary Kenneth Royal declared that Truman's order, integrate in the Army, would lower the morale of many white Southerners in the service, and that the Army should not be an instrument for social evolution. So that argument is not new.
No. Just gets recycled.
They said the same thing about women.
The racist people don't like it when you let other races in the Army. Go figure.
It's like these troll gamer dudes that don't like non-troll gamer dudes being gamers. This is our thing, not yours.
Right.
And the same thing with women, with gays and lesbians, and with transgender people. And then the last thing I wanted to point out was what Senator John McCain said. We should all be guided by the principle that any American who wants to serve our country and is able to meet the standards should have the opportunity to do so, and should be treated as the patriots that they are. That should be the principle that the Army follows. I mean, of course, it has to be effective, but I think the onus is on the detractor to say that a transgender or a lesbian person or a gay person or whoever can't serve and can't contribute to unit cohesion. Because I bet you what's going to happen, I think what they know is going to happen, is that these different groups come in, people from all diverse walks of life realize, oh, I'm serving with this transgender person who's got my back. Maybe it's not so important to give a shit about what their gender identity is. Maybe it's who is on the inside rather than a gender identity that is expressed outside. And they're afraid that now they're going to lose the support of Southerners in the service who might be against such attitudes, or people from all over the country who might be against such attitudes. Exposure, exposing it to the light. So that's what I found.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up a West Wing quote for the occasion, which is Sam Seaborn is talking with a couple of the generals about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because this was back in the 90s. And General Fitzwallace, who is one of the chiefs of staff, comes in, and he's a black man, and he says, you think it will disrupt the unit? You'll think the Army shouldn't be an instrument for social change. And they're like, yes, sir. He's like, that's what they said about me. Guess what? It did disrupt the unit. The unit got over it. And to me, I know it's like, yeah. So, I don't know. I think, disrupting the unit, there is no such thing as a non-disrupted unit. Looking at the history of the military, right? We are seeing it time and time again in various areas. So you can't pretend like that's your concern when you're also okay covering up sexual assault or racism or other issues. So be honest about, again, like I think that's just what my line is going to be tonight. Be honest about your objections, own it, and be willing to be challenged on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Martin, can I say one more thing? I'm sorry, I didn't get a
please.
chance to say this.
No, go ahead.
In the article, it says the response from the DoD was, "We direct our soldiers." This is back to the post by Chaplain Bigot Man. We direct our soldiers to, quote, think, type, post when engaging in conversations on social media platforms, and to follow DoD policies and regulations. When our online conduct does not follow these rules and regulations, we investigate and hold individuals accountable if they are found to be in violation. So that's good advice. Think, type, and post. And this preacher man who, because of our religiosity of this country, conned his way into the military so he could push his advocacy against different groups of people, should have thought first. He didn't have to do it there. He could have just kept his personal opinions, but he shot it off. And we can't have such emotional, shoot from the hip kind of attitudes, certainly in war times or in training or in HR, which is kind of what he is in. He's an HR officer in a way. So, and also just, we saw that with the former president, just shooting off bullshit and then letting the sparks fly. And that time has got to be past us, because social media is not new now. It's been around for a while. Right.
Right. Yeah, we just utilize social media as a way just to shoot off the first thing that comes in our heads, and that's not always a great thing.
Yep.
You know, as we all saw when that happened, ergo January 6th, insurrection. So, you know, I think that all these people are just so afraid that if we actually just really open up, you know, military in for people who want to serve, regardless of their race, their gender, or their sexual orientation, we'll have Starfleet. And I'm looking for Starfleet. I need the Federation, people. And that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah.
We've got till
2063.
I
know, right?
To make it happen.
That's true.
I feel bad that I'm the only non Star Trek watcher in the nonprofit tonight.
We can fix that.
I'm not against it. I just haven't taken the time yet. With that being said, I do need to move the train along here a little bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next segment, Looking Back.
Looking Back.
That was cool.
Today, we have really great interstitials. We have really good producers, and the crew's not too bad. Yeah, good people working behind the scenes. So we have a twofer today, actually, as far as looking back. First, we're going to be looking at oh gosh, I asked how to say her name before the show, and I'm going to say it wrong. Linton Price. Leontine. Oh my gosh, that was terrible. Leontine Price. Thank you. She was born today in 1927, and I recognize her because I've seen her face so many times as Cleopatra, but I just learned her name for the first time when we were reading over the articles for tonight's show. And then the second, looking back, is the founding of the NAACP. On February 12th, 1909. So, Cynthia, why don't you go ahead and get us started here on Leontine Price?
Okay, I just want to say that Leontine Price was a bad mamma jamma. Shut your mouth. I'm talking about Leontine. So, Leontine was actually from Mississippi, and she was very much so inspired to study opera because of Marianne Anderson. And Marianne Anderson was actually one of the first opera stars or classical singers that was African American. She was Marianne Anderson. Why do I want to call her Wilson so bad? I'm so sorry. but regardless, Marianne Anderson actually was very famous for singing on the steps at the Lincoln Memorial. And when Leontine actually saw that, that inspired her to go into this particular, medium. And she was also the first Black artist to sing at La Scala. And La Scala, of course, is the famous opera house that's in Italy, like one of the first espoused ones, most famous ones. And one of the things that I found that was really interesting about Leontine is that she, even though that she performed all over the world, and in the 50s, the late 50s, she was actually offered a secondary role to sing at the Metropolitan Opera. But upon the advice of friends, she turned it down. And it was claimed that Peter Herman Adler, who was the director of NBC Opera at the time, said that the offer Leontine got was subpar, and he said that Leontine is to be a great artist. What makes her debut at the Met must be done as a lady and not a slave. And when she finally actually premiered at the Metropolitan Opera, she played her role as Lenora of Il Trovatore, and she received a 42-minute standing ovation. And she actually rose to success during a very tumultuous time during the civil rights era in the 1960s. And for a person to actually, who is African American, to be able to rise through the ranks with all these particular barriers and breaking so many barriers during this particular time, it is something to be admired. I know that she's a personal hero of mine. I studied opera when I was in college, even though I have a bachelor's of science. Don't ask me about that, but it happened.
That's why Leontine was so important to you. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I studied opera when I was in college, and I would oftentimes listen to her recordings, and I would request arias like that she sang, and especially she was, even though she was really known for her Verdi operas, and like I said, she was mostly known for her portrayal of Aida, but she would sing the house down with Puccini, boy, I tell you. And so
links in the description. Can we get some links in the description for further listening for our viewers?
We'll get some links.
Yes, we will definitely get some links. Yes, and so for her, of course, but so oftentimes especially some of the arias that I would get assigned, I would look specifically for recordings of Leontine Price if she did it during a Met performance or recital or any type of concert whatsoever, because she was considered a lyric soprano. And those particular sopranos are ones who happen to take more lush arias with very long lines, not a lot of ornamentation. It's more a way to kind of highlight the voice as an instrument.
Can you give us an example?
No.
Okay.
I was gonna ask at the end of this article if we could pressure Cynthia into singing a little bit, but apparently not.
Maybe, we'll see. We'll see.
An after credits special. We'll talk to the producer.
Exactly, right. Because now, if you would have told me that, I would have had some prepared. But now, at the top of my dome, I'm like, what? But no, but just to summarize, like I said, she's a personal hero of mine. And it's just so inspiring what she was able to achieve in an era where it was damn near impossible to achieve what she did, and knowing that it was done during the civil rights era, it makes so much more sense to talk about the NAACP. Johnny?
Well, I know that Martin was having trouble saying NAACP. He might have been thinking about NWA because February 18th is Dr. Dre's birthday. So I'm celebrating.
Straight out of Compton.
Yeah, straight out of Compton.
Compton.
Actually, I was looking to see if that was August. So no, but no, the NAACP was formed on February 12th, 1909 in New York City, New York. It is the premier civil rights group. They have had their hand in everything. They did so much stuff, and actually bleeds into the previous article about the military. They've done so many things. In World War I, they succeeded in getting 600 African Americans commissioned as officers and 700,000 registered for the Army, for good or ill. They did do that. Of course, that war was just awful and unnecessary death all around. But nevertheless, it's their choice to sign up if they want to. And the NAACP was instrumental in that. In the 40s, Smith versus Allwright, Thurgood Marshall successfully challenged white primaries, which prevented African Americans from voting in southern states. That's not the last time you're going to hear about Thurgood Marshall, because he's one of the most amazing Supreme Court justices of all time and the premier litigator for the NAACP.
Yep.
They won in 1946, Morgan versus Virginia, banned states from segregation and public transportation that goes across state borders. They helped pressure Truman into signing that desegregation order that we mentioned before. 1948, Marshall and other cooperating attorneys won an important victory in Shelley versus Kramer, ended enforcement of racially restricted covenants, which is part of the legacy of slavery and part of the legacy of inequality in this country, preventing, let's say, African Americans or Latinos or Asian people from owning property in certain parts of a city, because you can do that kind of stuff, but now you can't do that kind of stuff anymore, thanks to Marshall and the NAACP. He helped strike down Texas and Oklahoma laws regarding segregated graduate schools, because there were separate but equal graduate and professional schools. No, they were separate schools, but they weren't equal schools.
That's right.
I don't even want to mention Brown versus Board of Education, because that's the one that everybody knows about, but he was involved in that. Little Rock, Arkansas. Lots of stuff with education. Now let's not talk about Thurgood Marshall. Rosa Parks was a member of the NAACP. We all know what she did. Montgomery bus boycott.
Right.
1960s, desegregation of lunch counters. Civil Rights Act. The NAACP was involved in that in 1964, and we've covered that on the show before. It would enforce the desegregation and promote discrimination in public facilities, government, and employment. I said promote. I think I said prohibit discrimination.
Prohibit, yeah. I was going to say, I think you want to change your words. Yeah, but we got you.
Yeah, we
Voting
want to
Rights
not
Act.
promote those things.
Yeah,
we don't want to promote.
That's why you shouldn't read online. But the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, death penalty in New Mexico, stop and frisk, they were involved in all that stuff. And they're still doing it today. So whenever there is some sort of advocacy for equality to break up the hold that these bigoted ways of thinking are still have hold, the NAACP is going to be there. So it's going to law school, you would run into their name all the time.
Right.
And so if those of you are out there and you think that you might want to donate some time or money or some of your energy to do so, they are very much a worthy organization. Don't think that their work is done because we had Obama. It's still ongoing, and they're going to be at the front of it.
Right. If anything, you need to join the NAACP, because I think that one of the things that has been very much so telling is that just because we had a Black president doesn't necessarily mean that racism and discrimination and bigotry is gone.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
That's right.
V, do you want to go ahead and wrap us up here?
Yeah, I'm just constantly in awe of how much I did not learn in school. I'm sure that if you go to an opera specific program or law school specifically, you might run into these people a little bit more. But in general, it feels like we're really missing out on a lot of the history of not only this country, but, internationally. And it makes me so sad that so many people are convinced that Western culture is a product of the, the old cis white man. And of course, that's the assumption because that's all that we cover, right? The classics, when we talk about literature, what's the common denominator there in music, in architecture, in law, in every single one of these areas, we focus on a particular subgroup and ignore everybody else's contributions. And I think a really big way, and this is going to, I hope, tie into the next conversation around increasing education and access to information. Hopefully, we can make sure that we're not just fighting those obviously big battles, but also those smaller ones that get these people into curriculums, that get these important dates and these important court cases into the average school system, so that more people can be aware of this.
Exactly. And I just
sorry, Cynthia, please.
Oh, I'm just sorry. And I mean, just to piggyback on what you just said, V, is that I know that like this being Black History Month, I'm often talk about like how it's not like ill mutual of American history,
right?
And
right.
and it's kind of insane that there's this like whole separation, like, okay, you got February now, so now we're going to talk about Black stuff, right? And the thing about it is that there were so many things that that come up during Black History Month was very integral to the making of what America was and is, and it should be something that is actually intertwined with the curriculum today.
Absolutely.
I always say that. I say Black history is American history, period.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
And
America would be nothing without Black folks. I mean, that's just true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it makes history class so much more interesting to learn a bigger, more diverse picture of what happened, because the way history is taught in large part, at least when I was growing up in the 1980s, was that it was this, was this idea that it was like, there was an inevitable progress from where we were to where we are. And it wasn't a constant struggle by people putting their asses on the line and risking everything. And there's losses and failures all along the way. And the bad guys won and still win, and they will continue to be always there, but is only through the efforts of those who will take it no longer that we make any progress in life. Can I say one more thing, Martin? I keep on doing this to you.
No, you're good.
I didn't get a chance to talk
about our show.
I didn't get a chance to talk about prices, any price. Okay. And I thought this was a really fun point. Okay. So her talent was so extraordinary that she would have to be on the Met tour, according to the Met. So, but that was going to create some problems in the segregated South. So this person, Bing, and the links will be in the description, said that the Met would no longer play to segregated houses because she couldn't play in the segregated houses. And so she gave the first performance by an African-American in a leading role with the company, singing Fanucula? Who is that? Cynthia. What is that?
Help him. Save him.
I'm trying to it's probably Fanciulla.
Fanciulla. Yeah, that's probably a CH if it's Italian. Fanciulla.
Yeah, that's probably Fanciulla.
She did it. She did it in Dallas, and then she sang later in Atlanta. And I mean, that was probably something right there. Oh, I'm sorry, segregated South. Go fuck yourselves. We need pricing in here. So, yes, very happy that happened.
No, absolutely.
If you guys want, I'll give you one line of a French song.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Okay, a little Claude Debussy, if it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
L'amour vaporé souffrante, l'âme douce, l'âme adorance de blé de lit, il s'écrise le jardin et qui pensait.
Beautiful.
Wow. love
Thank you,
it.
Cynthia.
That
Thank you.
okay? Can't have that for the whole rest of the show? Maybe. Like,
Yeah, seriously.
can
I'm
we-
like, can
No,
Cynthia
we
just
have
sing?
one more article to go through, people.
We'll just stand here and watch.
How much singing have we had on? We had Shelley Siegel, but how many other singers have we had on an ACA
oh my
program?
gosh.
Maybe just one, and now you're number 2.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Boom.
Cool.
There it is.
I love it. I love it.
All right.
Beautiful.
Well, cool.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I'm so glad that we got such extensive coverage on that well, not just one article, 2 articles, because that's a really important topic, not just this month, but every month. Like Cynthia was just saying, Black history is American history. It's just a fact. So moving on to article number 4 here. It's from the Egypt Independent, and it's about our people losing their religion in the Middle East. Who wants to go ahead and open it up here? You want to go ahead and get us started, Cynthia?
Oh, okay, sure. Why not? Because my name is coming up first. Cool. So
You had some good things to say in there. I liked what you were saying.
yeah, well, this particular article was, just interesting, and I think that it actually just follows like trends. So basically, this article was talking about like in like different Middle Eastern countries how like more people are falling away from religion, specifically Islam, and a couple of quotes here that I thought I just want to point out. Hold on. I don't know if this is a quote or if this is something I just pulled up. I'll just read it. The decreasing of those religious is a trend, like we said, that we're seeing globally. And I just pulled this from another article called it was from Princeton University, and it said personal piety has declined some 43% over the past decade, indicating that less than a quarter of the population now defines themselves as religious. And this actually came from another article when I was because like they quoted this particular researcher. I believe his name is Ronald Engelhardt. From the professor at the University of Michigan. He wrote an article based on some of his studies called "Giving Up on God," and one of the things that he said that between 2007 to 2019, an overwhelming majority of the countries that they studied was 43 out of 49 became less religious. And the decline in belief was not confined to high-income countries. It appeared, and apparently this is a phenomenon that was that was actually being shown all over the world. And even like I just noticed that like in this particular article, they made like some interesting correlations, specifically in Lebanon and also I want to say some of the other countries that they talked about was like Iraq, Tunisia, and Morocco. That with the increasing of access of education and literacy. You also saw, like I said, more of an increase of people actually, falling away. I was even tripping. I believe that the article mentioned that in Iran, I want to say that 9% of the population actually identified as atheist.
Wow,
And
that's higher than here.
yeah. I just even want to point out, I was like, damn, you guys got something up on us because only like less than 1% in America of African Americans will call themselves atheists.
Wow.
But I will say, but we do have an increase of nons. And not just even in these particular countries, but even here, I know that for African Americans, it's like around 18% now, which is actually
wow, that's huge.
Yeah, and so yay, keep it going, guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So like so I just thought it was just like this really interesting, like as more education and freedom of education as far as like being able to access these things is I believe is I want to say like a stimulating point of critical thinking that would make people less likely to be religious. So right on, Middle East.
Right? It seems like this is the way brains react when exposed to facts, right? This is something that happens across the board. We know this to be true is you give a brain enough facts and it becomes less religious. So I feel like this, while I was excited to hear this, and I'm actually very shocked by that 9% figure, Cynthia. It wasn't that surprising to me because as hard as it feels on, I know, our ends as atheist activists who are constantly talking about this and fighting for this and having these hard conversations with theists, it feels almost like this natural progression, like this seismic shift that is happening across the world, regardless of country, as that access to information is opening up again. And I'm honestly very excited about that. I did want to focus on something else that kind of piqued my interest here a little bit, though. And forgive me if this is a bit of a tangent. And of course, I'm tying it back to gender identity. But it said in the article that you mentioned, Martin, in Lebanon, it's almost impossible to not be officially linked to a religion, as the civil registry includes a sectarian identity of every citizen, and non-religious is not listed. So it is legally impossible to not be religious in Lebanon. And to me, this felt very similar and just as out there and ridiculous as being legally unable to identify as some gender other than man or woman or male or female. And to me, it feels like there's this push towards individualization. There's this push towards, among Republicans and conservative groups around the world to minimizing the impact of government, and yet we're able and totally okay with just allowing our governments to say, no, you legally cannot be non-religious. You legally cannot be one of these other genders. These are things we just will not recognize. And it does cause actual harm in travel, in the ability to get an education, in the ability to get medical care. It is an actual issue. It's not just symbolic either. So I'm curious to see how this shifts. And I would imagine that in the same way that the invention of and the incorporation of X as a gender marker in several states has been landmarked as kind of this big deal that is indicating that shift, that seeing non-religious pop up on some of these registries as an option is going to indicate a very big shift in the way these countries are moving.
What I noticed in reading that, and I think this does tie in, that people aren't necessarily moving away en masse from religion, but they are moving away from an Islamist government. And that gives them the freedom to be able to explore certain civil rights outside of whatever religious rights they have. That's the importance of a separation of church and state that they do not enjoy in a lot of countries of the world. And I think what we could start to see is a more rapid divergence from what might be considered traditional Muslim morality or rules or gender roles or sexual identity, and seeing people being free once they're protected, once they have civil rights that supersede whatever rights are given to them through the holy book of choice for that country. That's why it's so important here. So often the arguments we see is, well, I don't think it's right. It's against my religion. Well, that's jolly good for you. I'm glad that it's against your religion, but that doesn't matter because the law is not based upon your religion. Right. But, I went ahead and looked into that Arab Barometer, which was the source for that article that we looked at, talking about trust in Islamist parties is down. Trust in religious leaders is down from 2012. Yep. Those who say they're not religious is down. Now, how public are they? I don't know. They've identified themselves on what might be an anonymous poll. And then, of course, Muslims who say they attend mosque at least most of the time is down. Well, except for, down across the board. So maybe as these countries separate, we'll start seeing people have the freedom to be able to express themselves as individuals. And I really hope that continues.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And can we just be real? Y'all know back in the day, y'all mama made y'all go to church.
Right.
You didn't want to go. You wanted to sleep in on Sunday.
So
You wanted to
boring.
You wanted to watch Sunday morning cartoons. You know you did, and eat your Captain Crunch and call it a day. You didn't
Yeah.
want to go for real. Come on now.
No. No.
Sunday
Can you?
cartoons were the best.
They were right with Saturday cartoons. So I'm just
And you
saying.
think about how these poor Muslim kids that don't want to pray multiple times a day. They probably want to be playing and doing things, and if they have any, even the kids that believe probably would rather be doing something else. And imagine what it must be like for those kids to have to go through the motions every day,
Mhm.
multiple times a day, give up certain foods at certain times of the day. Like for Christians, there's not a lot you have to do, but for Muslim kids, there's a lot more that you have to go through, and when you're lying about believing.
Well, Protestant Christianity.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, well, Catholicism during Lent.
Yeah, no, Catholics do put in a little bit of work. Protestant Christianity is pretty much just kind of cruise control, speak the language, and you're there. And you can believe it, yeah, but right. But the difference is like there's no difference between believing it and just going through the motions. Really, like there's not many motions to go through.
Yeah,
no,
yeah. Well, my elementary school gave up talking for Lent during lunch. We had to give up talking.
That sounds terrible.
Like talking is
one of those children should be neither seen nor heard kind of concepts.
Probably that's what it sounds like.
Fuck it.
And you could get detention. Be seen or heard. Don't have kids.
Yeah, you could get detention if you talked during lunch, during Lent.
Incredible.
Yeah,
incredible.
Did you even get a chance to go outside?
Separation of church and state.
Yeah, for recess. But I was usually not doing my homework, so I had to stay in during recess to do my homework because I was a slacker.
Amazing.
Yeah,
you were one of the least slacker-like people I know.
I was a gunner when I got to law school, but up until then, slacker.
All right, let's go ahead because we are not quite running out of time yet, but we got just enough time left for our funny article here. So after reading this over, it's about hydroxychloroquine. It's about Oklahoma. It's a little funny. It's a little sad. What were our takes on this, folks? Oh, V, I believe you're muted.
Oh, weird. Okay. Sorry about that.
You're good. Go right ahead.
No, to me, this feels like a microcosm of everything that happened in the last couple of years, especially with this pandemic. The idea that making medical decisions and scientific decisions in order to curry favor in partisan ways and in partisan rooms, and how that drastically backfires and ends up, having you foot a pretty big bill, feels very indicative of what a bunch of us have been speaking up against this last couple of years. And I love that this is tied to Justin Humphrey, who wanted to implement a Bigfoot hunting season and other just very, very out there claims. And it's like, maybe look at the track record of the people that you're allying with as you're making these decisions and, maybe weigh those a little bit. But again, it all falls to the wayside when you're trying to look good for a particular party. Maybe Bigfoot wants the drugs.
Maybe.
Can we also talk about how Representative Humphrey called pregnant women hosts?
Hosts? Yes. I remember when that happened. I was utterly shocked, and now unfortunately I'm not anymore.
Maybe he's just a Star Trek fan and he confused pregnant people with trills.
Okay, there you go. Okay, back to Star Trek. That makes sense.
You whooshed me.
Not for long.
Okay. I will grab it back for you, Martin. I will grab it back. We all right here. Well, and also when we even talk about this whole partisan politics versus science and actually treating people properly. I mean, I guess to be fair, remember Trump did retweet, Dr. Demon's sperm when they were talking about why hydroxychloroquine was like a cure. Remember when, Dr. Demon's sperm did say that it was a cure for COVID and all this other stuff, even though that it has been debunked several times by several different outlets that is not the case.
Yeah.
I even knew a person that got COVID fairly early and was treated with hydroxychloroquine and went blind for a while.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah.
The Quinn will do that to you?
The Quinn will
Quinn.
do that
Quinn.
to you.
Okay,
The
that's
Quinn and
disturbing.
the Rona.
My
Yeah.
mom has decided to start taking quinine to protect herself from COVID because it's apparently the quote unquote natural version of hydrochloroquine. And I'm
No,
like,
it's not.
that feels
No.
very, very wrong on multiple levels. And she's been like pushing, like, you should get it. You should take it. I'm like, I'm not gonna do that.
No,
She-
don't do
does
that.
does she know about malaria and
Oh yes. Yeah.
what that's
no.
for?
Yeah, she heard a podcast apparently. Guys,
Mm.
podcasts know everything. We are officially
Well, we
It's true.
are on a
experts on
podcast.
anything
Therefore,
because we are
therefore,
yeah.
we now know everything. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is that
Right.
Rule
And
35? Is that Rule
minutes.
35?
I want it to be. That should be.
It should be a rule. Like you,
Yeah.
if you're on a podcast, you are now an expert on everything ever in life.
Only for the duration of the podcast though. Like
True
it's
that,
a
true
magical beginning and ending.
Indeed.
The
More
Quinn.
so like, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. Go
No,
ahead,
I was-
Cynthia. What?
No, I was just going to say, like, I remember like having this like whole back and forth with another person on social media concerning like, a vaccine specifically with COVID-19. And I remember like, them sending me a meme with a whole bunch of fruits and vegetables on it saying that this is the only vaccine that you need. And I was like, no, no, that is not a vaccine,
Oh
and
goodness.
those are so I'd be like, again, I'm vegan, and I'm about that fruit and vegetable life, but but still, like, no, people, like
Yeah, no.
hydrochloroquine is very much so has been debunked by scientists that
Yeah.
actually treated COVID-19 properly. I
Mhm.
had a friend that almost lost their sight. They got it back,
Mhm.
thank goodness.
Damn.
But
Good.
still, like this is this. No, don't do this.
Look,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that my research said that there are people who need hydroxychloroquine to treat different conditions. I think one of them was lupus.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
when all
Yeah.
this hit, when the Quinn was in the news, they were saying that there was a shortage for patients with lupus and other conditions who need that for the treatment of
Yeah.
their
Mhm.
problems. And this is that anti-science, ass-kissing, hero worship thing that we have. We need to hold our representatives accountable to us, not to demagogues or
Mhm.
former demagogues. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of taxpayer resources. It's anti-science. It's conspiracy thinking, and it's just garbage. And I hope that Kevin Stitt, who's the governor who ordered it, faces some consequences for it. As far as the AG who is trying to sell that stuff back, I don't know if that AG had any role in approving this to try to get this sold back, but that's one of those other things. We have to remember that government employees sometimes get caught up in the winds of higher ups that make terrible decisions. I don't know if this particular AG was like, yeah, let's buy the chloroquine, or if it was one of those, well, shit, it's my job to go either purchase it or negotiate it or
Yeah.
sell it back. But let's make sure that with government employees and elected officials that we give support to those people who need it to get the good work done. That not everybody in government, even during the former administration, were bad people. Usually the names that were incompetent ass lickers, but those who were actually getting the jobs done were along for the ride and they hated it. I had some experience under Bush's EPA a long time ago, and it was the people I worked with had a countdown clock for when Bush was out of office, right? So there's plenty of people who didn't like that previous administration. There's plenty of people who now probably hate the Biden administration, and they have their own countdown clocks. It's not a monolith.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes for good reasons,
Yeah.
but regardless, like with all of this, especially like in this pandemic, I encourage people to, get the vaccine. if it's available to you, please do. And I understand that there are some scary reports, so you should speak with your doctor first before you do it. But I just had my second dose of Moderna and I'm fine. But
Oh,
but I
wonderful.
yeah, so I mean, but like, but I understand that sometimes people can have reactions. That's why I say please talk to your doctor first before you do it. But if your doctor and you say okay, cool, please get the vaccine.
Mhm. Absolutely. Also, apparently, a new study came out that double masking increases your decreases your risk by like something like 96%, as opposed to just wearing a single mask. So do that too while you're waiting for this vaccine. Double mask.
Exactly.
Double bag your faces, people. No one wants
Double
to see
bag
your
your
mugs.
face.
Not at all. See, this is me now. Don't want nobody to see that. Don't want
It's
nobody
not
to see that.
Thursday. It's
There you
not
go.
Thursday.
Oh, okay. Oh,
People are
yeah.
gonna be like, "Who are you?" You're gonna have to go like this. Oh, hi, V.
Yeah. All right. So we covered quite a bit today. We talked about abortion rights in other countries for once. We always talk about those in America, I feel like, but it's something going on. It's a fight that's going on in other countries too. We talked about the army chaplain who was denigrating transgender troops, or as I like to say, otherwise known as troops. They're just as valid as anybody else who serves.
Mhm.
We looked back on Leontine Price and the
Teen.
founding of the NAACP. Both happened in February.
Leontine.
Leontine, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to say it like 10 times in the mirror
Rem-
after this for penance.
Rhymes with hydroxychloroquine.
Oh
No,
God.
it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
We looked at the Middle East and how they're actually losing religious participation there. And then we talked a little bit about hydroxychloroquine and Oklahoma's big mistake. So going forward, I just want to say to all of our fans out there, be safe, be well, seek community and you'll find it. And if you don't find it, build it. There are atheists everywhere and we're all finding our voices. The internet's helping with that. But yeah, just reach out and be honest about yourself. Cynthia, closing thoughts?
This is a great show. I'm so glad, got a chance to be with you on this V. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is awesome. And again, please, people, take the vaccine. I can't say that enough. But again,
Yep.
decision between you and your personal doctor. But
Talk to your doctor.
talk to your
And then
doctor
take the
first, and
vaccine.
then take the vaccine and double mask.
Unless your doctor says specifically you should not do this.
Exactly, but that's why I say talk to your doctor first. But if your doctor and according to your physiology is good to go, please take the vaccine, double mask, social distance, wash your hands, and listen to
Can't wash your hands enough.
And listen to Leontine Price.
And
There you
listen to
go.
Leontine
Yes.
Price.
Leontine.
Whose name I will not butcher ever again.
Exactly.
Johnny, your closing thoughts for us.
Stay safe, stay active, both physically and in your community, whether it's through the NAACP or GLAAD or whatever political party you belong to. Stay active in your local community and on a national level, but stay active physically because you can kind of go crazy in stir like some of us are. Make sure you're taking care of those people out there that you know who are alone. Reach out to them, make sure that they know you care, and maybe run an errand for them if you can, if that's something you can do. This isn't over yet. We're going to be in it for a while, and we got to do it together apart. So do that or else.
Johnny will personally come to your door and from a safe distance admonish you strongly.
2 yardsticks taped together, I will hit you.
That's what I always say to people when they get too close, either at work or just out when I'm out and about shopping. I'm like, "Oh, did you bring your yardstick?" Because I don't want to yell at people. I'd rather just make it a joke. Stay 6 feet away from me, or I'll get grumpy.
There you go.
V, what final thoughts do you have for us? I'm gonna let you wrap it up here.
Awesome. So today I think the common denominator here is seeing what happens when people are exposed to information, right? We're seeing that in the Middle East, of course, as people are moving away from religiosity. We're hearing that in the voices of the protesters in Poland right now. We're experiencing backlash because of that informed action that has been taken in our military. And we're even seeing it in Oklahoma, kind of. And my hope for you, dear listeners, dear viewers, is that you take away from today the idea that the only way to make progress really is to continue to talk about it, right? Have these conversations, get informed, know the background, do research, and come to the table with something to add, because the world needs your voice too.
Absolutely. And just to wrap us up here, V, we can go and look at your other content that you create at, it looks like Linktree/V Bianca.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you wanted to plug?
No, actually, that Linktree has my Twitter, it has my Patreon, it has my YouTube, and will have my merch store shortly. So yeah, that's a one-stop shop for everything V.
Thanks.
Hoping we get something androgynous cat cyborg themed in that merch store.
Way ahead of you, Martin.
Love it. Love it. Don't forget to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thenonprofits. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, any articles you may have for us. Shoot us an email at non-profits@atheist-community.org. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.